Hey, it's Matt Roush,
And Mike Brennan.
and we're back with another segment of the M Squared TechCast.
And we have calling in from Matt's favorite vacation spot, Traverse City, Russell Schindler. And Russell, I've known Russell for a long time. Traverse City New Tech, I think when I first met you, what was it, a decade ago?
Yep.
Or kind of a long time.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yes. And what Russell has before COVID-19 pandemic, he had a really great environmental app that was for testing water samples, things like that. Why don't you talk about a little bit of that first, and then we'll talk about how you've evolved that.
Yeah, so I'm actually a geologist, so I have been doing environmental investigations, collecting samples, writing reports. And just over the years started developing technology to collect samples. And we basically just last year rolled out a mobile app for facilitating and the data associated with collecting environmental samples. And when you collect environmental samples, you got to go through the contamination. So being able to use a mobile app to do that and be able to track everything. The big picture, what we do is we collect the samples, we submit the samples to the lab. We got a lab app as well. And then when the lab's done with the analysis, we can actually generate reports and show you where the contamination is and isn't in a matter of seconds. So it's a pretty neat little platform.
Okay.
So it's a geographic information systems kind of, or?
Well, kind of. We don't actually, not a true GIS system. We're actually in a lot of ways better. GIS is very powerful and they can do things that we can't, but we do some things that they can as well. So.
All right, and now you've morphed that into something that can be used to track samples for COVID-19 testing, right?
Yeah, so back about a month ago now, it seems like forever because we've been down.
Yeah.
But
longest
the
April
president,
in history, right?
I know. The president came out and talked about doing these remote sample collection things in Walmart parking lots and Rite Aid parking lots, and that it occurred to me like, well, that's a lot of remote data, and you're collecting a sample, sending it to a lab, and then reporting the results. I'm like, that's what we do. And I'm like, how are they going to do that? And I started seeing pictures of how they're doing it, and they're out there with a clipboard and a piece of paper, and they're writing everything down. I'm like, when you get to the level that they need to get to in terms of testing everybody, paper and clipboard is not going to cut it anymore. So that's when it occurred to me. I'm like, they've got to step up their digital game, or it's going to get out of hand. And so that's kind of why I'm like, we can modify our app to help with the COVID-19 data collection and the reporting. So,
and you've done exactly that, right? Yeah, you've done exactly that. You modified.
Yeah. It can be used right now, but it needs to be optimized. One of the things we still got to do is make sure we build the HIPAA compliance part of it. And so we're still working on it, but yes, we're basically mostly looking for people to start using it. And we've talked to a lot of people, but here's the problem. Nobody has any tests. I've literally talked to dozens and dozens of health departments and hospitals, and the one answer they all come back with is, well, we only have a handful of tests. Like, we don't need software to manage 15 samples. So that's really the biggest problem, is the lack of actual tests. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm hearing that. We've been inundated with stuff on this, so I wouldn't say Matt and I are experts, but we've heard from a lot of experts, and that seems to be the critical issue right now, is lack of testing.
Correct. And, if you don't have tests, you don't need software to manage things you don't have. So.
Right. And what are you hearing from the people you talk to about that? Where are we on both testing of active cases and testing for antibodies to see, to figure out how many people have already had it?
Well, I don't even know of anybody that even has their hand on an antibody test. If you know, I'd love to find out, because I'd actually like to find out if I've had it, and I'm positive for the antibody. And then, honest, when I do talk to people about our software, their question to me is like, "Do you know who has tests? Like, can you hook us up?" Like, they're looking for people who can supply large amounts of tests. We're actually talking with a couple of laboratories, and they don't have all their tests yet. There's a company out of Ann Arbor that is looking to kind of get in. They've got their own proprietary tests, and they're waiting for some FDA approval on it. And they want to team up with us to actually do private industry testing, like literally go to the private companies that probably more like the frontline companies like Meijer, Walmart, those companies that are they have their people out there on the front lines being exposed. Maybe they want to set up like weekly testing of all their employees. So as soon as we can get the tests and then we marry our software together, we've got a business product where people can set up a mobile location, do the tests, and actually have the results in real time. And one of the other things that I think is going to be a big market is they've determined that you can actually detect the presence of COVID-19 virus in sewer systems and at wastewater treatment plants. And so if you use something like our software where you go out and you start backtracking along the sewer system, you'll be able to identify neighborhoods and maybe even individual homes where the virus is coming from. But if you can narrow down a small area, a block, a neighborhood where the virus is maybe originating, and if they do this routine sampling, maybe even daily, and when they see the virus popping up, they can then set up a mobile hotspot, testing location in that neighborhood and start testing the residents of that neighborhood, or even go door to door and offer the tests so that when this thing gets down to a reasonable level, it's going to be like a game of whack-a-mole, right? These things are going to pop up, and it's going to be the government's responsibility to whack these things back down, test the people, quarantine them, contact trace them, and then test those people in quarantine as necessary. And if they don't, speed is going to be of the essence, right? You can't do contact tracing, 10 days after they've had contact. You have to be able to do it quickly. So.
Yeah, under normal circumstances, trying to remember who you were in contact with 10 days ago could be a challenge. I mean, exactly. I've been cooped up in my house for a month. It'd be pretty easy for me right now, but not under normal circumstances.
Right. Yeah, but as they open up the economy, open things back up again, you'll get back out there. I'll get back out there, and the idea is like you have to have real time testing, real time results. And then, if all of a sudden, you test positive, you can be like, okay, here's where I was at in the last 10 days or however long they need to have it. But it's going to be important to be responsive. If that test takes, 2 weeks to get the results back, it's just going to be too long. They got to be able to get the tests, be able to not just, as soon as those lab results are in, and they got some tests out there, it's 15 minutes. You want to be able to report that right away, show it on a map. If you're testing the sewer system, you don't want the sewer system results and locations to be reported, a day or two later. You want to know 2 minutes later, here's a positive result, here's where it's at, move upstream. That way, and people can coordinate then. You don't have to, go back to the office, compile your results, and then go back out in the field. If you can see it all while you're out there, you can then start to do a proper investigation.
Right. I watched your Facebook video last weekend where you're out strolling with your dog talking about that very thing where that would make it so much simpler to really zero in on precisely where hotspots are, right?
Exactly. It's all about being able to make actionable decisions, see actionable data and then make decisions based on the look of that data, right? And that's really what we're lacking. I mean, if you just go back to what the CDC actually recommends in a pandemic, it is test, quarantine the people that are positive, do contact tracing, test those people in quarantine as necessary. And even quarantining people even before you test them. If you've been in contact with somebody who's positive for coronavirus, you should be tested, or you should quarantine yourself right away and then obviously get tested. So
yeah, therein lies the rub. Good.
Yeah, the other important part is the antibody testing, right? There needs to be widespread antibody testing. They did a study over in Massachusetts. They took 200 people randomly off the street. 1/3 of those people came back with the antibody. 1/3. And
Wow.
so, it's there's a lot of people out there that have probably already had it. I actually was down in New Orleans the second week in February.
Hmm.
A week after I got back,
Oh, you're
I
breaking
didn't
up.
feel so good. For about 4 days, I've had a little fever. How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're cut.
Okay.
The screen was frozen for a second. Good.
Yeah. So I was down in New Orleans and came back and I'm suspicious that I actually may have had it and I've recovered and I may be positive for the antibodies, which would be great. One other thing that I'd like to say is the President of the United States needs to use the War Production Act of 1950, Wartime Production Act, and literally use that act to start producing tests. And, Mike, you've been at a lot of these tech events, like as I have, where, pharmaceutical companies get up there and biomedical companies and they pitch their product. And one of the things that the business hook that these companies are always looking for is scarcity. They like the subscription model and they want to be the only one that has a product. The president says he's hesitant to use the Wartime Production Act to make these laboratories and these testing companies produce the test. Well, I'm here to tell you that they like scarcity when it comes to tests, right? If you try and buy a test right now, a COVID-19 test, it's $100 a sample. $100 a sample. Yes.
Wow.
And it should be a lot less than that. No, and the testing companies, the labs, they want scarcity, right? Because scarcity means higher prices, better profits. And I'm not accusing them all of that, but I can tell you as an industry as a whole, they're not necessarily worried about getting cheap product out there in mass. It's not a great business model for them. And so the president needs to go, look, you need to produce them. We're going to give you a fair price. And then, get as many people making as many tests as possible. They don't have to all be 15-minute tests. Even a 2-day test, where they take the swab and they send it to the lab, it doesn't matter. We'd prefer the 15-minute test, but if you can get, 100 million 2-day tests out there, then do that. There's got to be something that they do. And I would strongly encourage every state rep, everybody contact their government, their government representatives and tell them they need to tell the president to use the Wartime Production Act to get these things out there. Because it's just frankly ridiculous. South Korea, the reason they got a handle on things is they started testing everybody, everybody. So
we're gonna have to leave it at that. We're out of time. Why don't you give your website address where people can find out more?
Yep, sampleserve.com. Sampleserve.com.
All right.
Additional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life, but LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.